This one's a classic.
The very early history of MapleStory has always been a bit of an enigma to me. The best information we have is often simply the first release versions of the Korean client from April 2003. Before that, not much is known definitively outside of specific niche pieces of knowledge. Recently, however, a new pre-release build of the game was discovered, and it has a few very interesting differences from the versions we've had access to up until now. Things that have never before been seen publicly. So today, we're going to take a look through some of the oldest versions of the Korean MapleStory files that are publicly available and talk about some of the interesting differences that might not be common knowledge, especially for GMS players. Before we get into it, let's talk about Fortune Mill, an incremental idler game where you have to escape from a factory by progressing through rooms, becoming a millionaire in each. As you pay off the guys blocking your path, you unlock access to new minigames, each of which has a ton of upgrades and augments. This, of course, helps push you even further, with little guys helping you out along the way. Most of my channel consists of progression content. I just love this gameplay loop of satisfying number go up, and Fortune Mill does this extremely well. Each room has upgrades that boost other rooms, and you can travel between them as you unlock access. And eventually, it becomes a connected system of every room helping the others as you work your way to freedom. There are no ads and no microtransactions. Fortune Mill is just a single purchase to unlock the full game. iPhone enjoyers can scan the QR code on screen to download Fortune Mill from the App Store for free, and it's also available on Steam. MapleStory originally began development by Wizit in 2002. The company founded a year prior on April 12, 2001 by an ex-Nexon developer, and they were still trying to find success at this point. The early Wizit website was built entirely in Flash, which makes browsing through archives difficult as the overall functionality is less than ideal with an abundance of broken links and images. I don't have any idea if this is what it was meant to look like or not. One of the games Wizit is credited for developing in its very early days was a game called Oricon Master, a game hosted by Say Club, which is an early social media site from what I understand about it. I've never seen any video footage of Oricon Master. I'm not sure any exists, but the few screenshots that exist make it appear to be some kind of tactical RPG. Gameplay revolved around collecting these red gems known as Orichalcon. There was a ranking system, 6 classes, and overall, the game never really had more than a few hundred active players at any given time. The people who did play it seem to very fondly remember it though. The game is a weird little blip in Wizit's history, predating MapleStory by only a factor of months. The story of MapleStory is fairly well known by now. I've talked about it before on my channel. It essentially began as a project that aimed to get away from the, at the time, dark MMO themes that were oversaturating the market in Korea. When it eventually launched, it did so well that it threw the young Wizit CEO into a bit of an existential crisis, and he sold the IP and the whole company to Nexon. In 2011, this man owned 80 million USD worth of Nexon stock, so don't worry, he's doing fine. He also really loved Canada. Victoria Island is loosely based off of the very real island to the north of Canada. Deep Elnath is based in part off of the Rocky Mountains, specifically the section in Canada, I assume northern Canada. I mean, I know we gloss over this fact sometimes, but just think about it for a second. The game itself is called MapleStory. That's about as Canadian as you can get without just outright naming your game I studied in Canada, and here's everything I love about it. The oldest version of MapleStory that we have access to is a build dated April 27th, 2003. This version of the game is so old that the total file size is under 100 megabytes, whereas the first version of GMS we received over 2 years later was significantly larger at around 300 megabytes. That sounds tiny by today's standards, but this was also back when developers cared a little bit about saving resources. Okay, that's 1.4 topical quip. You can see this in some of the weird compression artifacts that are present in some of the graphical assets. A lot of this is likely just real artwork that was scaled down and compressed to save space, rather than everything in the game strictly being pixel art. This version of the game is technically not really the beta of KMS, though that's what people refer to it as. It was before the official release a few days later, so I refer to this as the pre-release version 1.11. There are a few interesting parts of this build that are specific to this version, but before we cover them, I want to at least give some context as to what the game was like back in this pre-GMS era. I assume a good number of you might not be intimately familiar with the game during this period of time. One of the most obvious and striking differences you'll notice almost immediately is the completely different user interface. The UI back in this era was colder and sharper. There are a lot of 90-degree angles, cold blues and grays everywhere. The overall color scheme reminds me a lot of games like Trickster Online, but less whimsical. Pretty much every UI window was completely different back then. There are a lot of them too. The cash shop is the only element that doesn't look all that different. It seems to have had its full original design by this point, but from what I understand, there exists no code in the game to actually access it just yet. The login screen was totally different. Again, a lot of cold blue and gray colors featured here. It's really weird to see. Speaking of login screens, both Wizit and Nexon's logos are featured in the client. Wizit was funded by Nexon, so they've had a hand in this since the beginning. The interesting part about this is that Wizit's original blue logo is featured here, rather than the one we're all likely more familiar with. I think they changed it shortly after MapleStory's launch. What are these gloves? That's a weird sprite, right? Right, chat? Guys, am I crazy or is that weird? I saw this picture for the first time not that long ago, and it really fascinated me. I figured these had to be work gloves. Work gloves are ubiquitous among MapleStory players for as long as the game has existed, but I've never seen this specific sprite before. Not that I make a habit out of looking through old KMS game files, though. Okay, that's just a lie. I'm just lying now. I think this is a very good example of what I'm describing when I talk about the pre-GMS era's colder and more angular art direction. The new work glove sprite that we are all familiar with is like puffy and round. These are thinner and they look less goofy. They actually more closely resemble real-life work gloves, as my Discord server was telling me earlier. On the topic of items, I noticed that warriors seem very overdeveloped at this point in the game. They have like 25 weapons in the files. This is an insanely high number of weapons when most other categories have like 5. I don't know this for sure, but couple this with the fact that they're also the only jobs to have any second job skill entries, all of which possess placeholder artwork, and I have reason to believe that perhaps they might have gone a little crazy with developing warriors before pulling back scope for the other jobs. Like, why does one job need 5 different weapon categories, you know? It is common knowledge that the 4 classes were conceived before development began, so it's not like they were just trying to figure it out as they went along, though. But you want to know the worst part? The thing that just ruins my day whenever I think about it. The Berserker is in these old version 1.11 files. Yeah, it was a level 60 weapon back then, lower level than the level 70 blue Screamer, which is also present in the files. The problem is that they actually gave it 4 attack speed at this point. Pretty high for a two-handed sword, but most weapons had an unreasonably fast attack speed value back then anyway. So it turns out they consciously made the decision to not only make the Berserker have a higher level requirement, but also eventually drop its attack speed all the way down to 8. Pretty much every two-handed sword had its attack speed lowered sometime after version 1.11. I'm not sure exactly when this happened. Most of them were dropped down from 4 to 6, or maybe 5 if they were lucky, and Berserker got dropped all the way down to 8. Remember, the lower the number, the faster the attack speed. I will never understand why this decision was made for the Berserker, and there are a few weapons like this in the game. I've angrily discussed them in other videos. Another thing I noticed is that weapon attack speed was seemingly not displayed on the item's tooltip back in this era. This Lionheart sword in a player's shop in this very old version of what is kind of the free market doesn't seem to display its attack speed, only category, strength, attack, and remaining slots. This does seem inconsistent though, since there's another screenshot of an Asiatic bow that does display its attack speed, so I have no idea what the deal is here with this. There were plenty of game elements that had already been finalized by this point, things we will all be familiar with. Early potions had the same sprites and effects, etc. Items were generally the same, though the stamps were included among them as regular items. No idea what these were ever used for. Apparently, before OMOC was implemented, it was simply just Go, including black and white Go stones, presumably dropped from monsters. There were also Tetris pieces in the files, literally called Tetris pieces. Things I've never seen in GMS. I don't know if they're allowed to call them that. In a previous video, I mentioned Darksight's old movement speed reduction originally being more severe than -30% at level 1. I decided to check this out and found that in this very early build of the game, Darksight didn't even have a movement speed penalty at all. The only difference between level 1 and 20 is higher MP cost and longer duration. A few months later, Darksight was given its movement speed penalty, and this is when it was set to its insane -57% speed at level 1. Even later, sometime around the beta of GMS, or possibly a little sooner, this reduction was lowered to be less ridiculous. I guess this is what it's like talking about the beta of an old game. Numbers got changed. Isn't that just so cool? Now let's move on to some of the more interesting parts of this very old version of MapleStory. There exists only a couple videos of the KMS beta that most people have probably seen by now if you're interested in this stuff. Back when Warrior was the only class and video recording quality was limited to a resolution of 160 by 120 with very crunchy audio. This was beautiful back in the day. Sleepywood and the early ant tunnel maps have existed as far back as we know, and this can be confirmed by looking at these files. They contain Sleepywood, the surrounding ant tunnel maps, and a single map leading down to where Forest of Golem would eventually be, though this map doesn't actually contain any golems. There's also a few of the maps to the west of Sleepywood that connect it to other towns. It's pretty much just an unfinished version of Sleepywood that ends at Drake Hunting Ground. Instead of this portal leading further towards Cargoes and Junior Balrog, it just loops back around to Cave of Evil Eye. The real reason I bring this up, though, is because these maps, and all maps in the game in the files at this point, contain a node that indicates whether or not the map should have a snow effect or a rain effect. And for some reason, in Sleepywood maps, the snow effect is enabled. You can see it in the old beta videos. These variables would not be kept in the files for very long. I'm not entirely sure why this is, though. They might have just been moved. The snow effect itself was kept and was eventually implemented into the Snowy Snow cache item. I struggle to fully understand why weather effects were removed as a concept, considering I like them. So they should exist in the game if I like them. This world is so fucking so fucked up. Other maps in the game had subtle differences. They're all strikingly similar to the early versions of the maps we received in GMS. It is weird seeing these maps unfinished though sometimes. For example, Victoria Island feels so much smaller. It's extremely surreal and dreamlike almost. Drake Hunting Ground with no portal on the top left is like Popeye's biscuit with no drink. What the fuck? I really wrote that. How about Hinnesis market houses with neon mushroom caps and no entrance to the free market? You can get on top of this house without hacking. You can teleport down to the background layer in the Bowman Instructional School. This is a very old glitch that stems from the way these assets were layered back at this time. Then there's the rainforest east of Hinnesis that's just a flat map with 4 pigs. Hinnesis Park has only one NPC, Pia. It has this weird ice cream stand with nobody in it, and there's no storage system at all. Same for Sleepywood. One NPC, no portal to enter the hotel, and no storage. Hinnesis Hunting Ground 2 and 3 don't exist. There's not even a rope to attempt to access them. Pig Beach doesn't have its Iron Hog spawn getting in everybody's way all the time. Lith Harbor is a little weird, especially without the ship to Florina Beach. It just feels off. Kerning City lacks any kind of sewer system, and it specifically feels really eerie. And this is in part because of one of the most interesting pieces of the puzzle that is MapleStory in 2002. One of the coolest finds in version 1.11, which is the old Kerning City music. This track, titled Nothing Left, was originally used before Bad Guys, the Kerning City track we're all familiar with. As far as I understand, this track has only ever been mentioned in design documents in the past, never before heard until these files were unearthed about a week ago. This track, compressed as it may be, feels incredibly weird to listen to, especially given the knowledge that it was meant to be the track that plays in Kerning City. It's far too eerie, which is cool conceptually and I think would have worked, but MapleStory was specifically designed with the intention of avoiding the gritty, dark MMO trends of the time. So it makes a lot of sense to me that tracks such as this and Where the Barlog From were remade to be less creepy. It's unfortunate that this track was never used anywhere because I think it's actually well made, but at least we get to hear it now. The percussion sounds incredibly similar. I think I've listened to this track about 100 times now. To wrap up this video, let's take a look at what I think is probably the most interesting part of this. Who's this guy? He looks kind of fucking weird. This is an early design for the Toro Spear / Toro Macy's enemies. He's the only guy in the data whose sprite looks different, and I checked them all, trust me. Anyway, this guy is called
Minotaurus.
He has full animations and stats associated with him, but his mob ID is clearly a placeholder. Out of context, this sprite work doesn't seem great, but when it's in the game, it makes sense contextually. The real issue is the design. It's far from as imposing as the final versions of the monsters we received, so it makes a lot more sense that the design was updated. Have you ever wondered why Tauros never show their faces? Well, it's probably because they look like this, and the artists felt as though having them do so would make them look a lot less intimidating. I think they were right. This guy looks like a friendly tank NPC who would join you on a quest to make sure you didn't die, not the guardians of the Sleepywood Sanctuary or whatever. A couple last notes on mobs. Sturges weren't fully implemented just yet. They were called Small Bat, but were otherwise identical to their final implementation. Lupins were almost fully implemented as well. They were named Yo-Yo and didn't have a banana throwing sprite yet, so instead they just cast Energy Bolt to attack. That's certainly not every single possible interesting thing from the old KMS files, but it's what I found most compelling from version 1.11 specifically. I've wanted to talk about this stuff for a good while, and I think this is a decent starting point. It's always fun to compile a list of interesting finds of old MapleStory stuff and just talk about them a little bit, especially given how early MapleStory is so heavily shrouded in obscurity. If the data is even available to begin with, it's probably entirely in Korean, and also good luck finding it. Big shout out to everyone who archives this stuff, because I'm certainly not doing anything more than making my own backup copies and putting interesting stuff together into a YouTube video. And I'm sure at some point I'll have more to talk about.